I'm very fortunate because I think that Dr. Mickiewicz just said almost everything. So I'm not really sure what I can add. My first question is, what is the most common mistake that writers make in their manuscript? Well, I would say the most common mistake is that they don't target the journal to which they're sending their papers very well. So one advice that I can say, in addition to the long discussion that you had from Dr. Mickiewicz, is that it probably pays for you to take a look at the journal that you're sending your papers to. By take a look, I mean try to read what kind of papers are getting published in that journal and whether or not they're related to what you're doing. That would be kind of one hint as to whether or not you forgot some important things to mention or to set up what you're doing in the appropriate context. This is probably particularly important for a new journal like the Journal of Human Capital that exists only about 5 years. The latest addition to the University of Chicago Press family of economics journals. So we have the same managing editor as the Journal of Political Economy. And it is set up like a general interest journal because of the concept of human capital, which is pervasive and includes basically all areas of economics. So it's not micro, it's as much micro as it is macro. It is much labor economics as it is health economics. It is as much as economic growth and development, and the economics of entrepreneurship, the economics of information generally, even information in financial markets. So being a general interest kind of journal, it definitely does pay to see what are the articles that are being accepted, what level of discourse is being sought by the journal. Would it be a note? Should it be something more elaborate? Should it give you any idea of what the size of the journal is? Can you send a paper without any math? I guess the answer, yes, you can, but it's going to be reviewed very rigorously. You can do marvelous things without math. Sometimes it's being used as a good guide to basically let you express well what you have in mind, spell out your model, if you have one, or set up your empirical work in it. So it can be done, but you will find most articles do have a part of them that includes mechanics. I don't want to talk just about the Journal of Human Capital because I think that that's a general idea. The journal that you're going to, you need to do an initial inspection and find how your paper may fit into the context, especially if the topic that you are discussing might very well fit a chain of topics that has already appeared in the journal. So linking with the literature generally is a very good idea. Linking with the literature that is being published in a particular journal is also expedient, in particular because they may be your referees. So the next one I think is a very good one. What should be included into an introduction section and what should not? This is sometimes the most difficult thing for editors to go through, and a lot of advice is being given to those promising papers. If they're not promising, there isn't going to be much discussion about whether or not the introduction is effective or not. I'm talking about a stage in which the article is considered to be innovative, that it looks to be promising, that you want to go forth with it. Then I think you encounter very often an introduction that needs to be thoroughly reviewed. So what's a good introduction? It shouldn't be very long. It shouldn't be a substitute for the paper. But it shouldn't be so short either. It should really set up what the paper is about. What's the main idea? That should come out clear from the introduction. What's the motivation for you to take a look at the particular question that you're writing on? So motivation is a very big issue. Some people in economics in particular, unfortunately, I've got to admit, write papers that are elegant, technically competent, but they do it more or less like an exercise in economics, which is an easy way to do it, especially if you are equipped with the tools that enable you to do either theoretical paper or an empirical paper. But you have to motivate why it is what you're doing. Why is it important? What does it add? And so that's the third issue. The value added to the literature. Value added is a concept that you're all familiar with, I think, if you're economists. But value added is important in a journal in particular, in a published paper in a journal in particular. What was the state of the art before you got into your topic? And I don't necessarily mean that it has to be very ambitious when I say state of the art. State of the art having to do with a particular question that you think that you are adding something to the literature. That has got to come out very clear. And then a hint at the very minimum at the methodology that you're using and the main results of the paper. That, in my book, is an effective introduction. How are the referees selected? Well, they are selected, it depends on the way a journal functions. In the Journal of Political Economy, there are typically 4 editors that divide the work among themselves. There is a kind of editor-in-chief, but the responsibility is fairly evenly delegated. In the Journal of Human Capital, they insisted on having a more structured system, so there is an editor-in-chief, and there are about maybe 8 to 10 editors or associate editors to which papers are being sent. So it's the function of the editor-in-chief to do the first reading. And on the basis of the first reading, if the paper is not desk rejected, it is sent to an associate editor, and it's the associate editor that handles the paper. Sometimes it could be the editor-in-chief. The referees are selected basically thinking about the best people who can advise the editor-in-chief in the end, but also advise the author. Do the most effective reading to determine if the paper is publishable, but also have the expertise to handle the particular topic that the paper is about. So that's generally the way that referees are selected. How long does it take to review an article? Well, I am very sympathetic to all of you because I've been in your shoes and I've been in my colleagues' shoes, those who have to come up for tenure, which requires having established a good set of articles published in good journals. How long it takes? Unfortunately, in the top journals, some time. It takes too long. I think it's taking too long almost everywhere. It depends on the objective of the new journal. So the Journal of Human Capital set up a target that since we're the new kid on the block, that we should do a little better job. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and I'll tell you what the drawback is mostly. The drawback is the referee. A referee is very busy, and the referee sometimes takes a lot of time, sometimes for a good reason, because it's hard to make a decision. The referees that I have been dealing with, I can tell you, are astonishing in their depth and in their care, the care in which they approach any given paper. So we wind up as a new journal giving a lot of advice to authors. I personally do it. So we do have a very high rejection rate, and I don't want to discourage anybody. It is as much as a major journal in economics. But the difference is that we do tend to give the authors an option by indicating perhaps a better way of doing it. And even if a paper is rejected sometime, we leave a crack in the door open. In other words, you know, we are not going to publish the manuscript that you sent, but we have given you a lot of advice. If you think that on the basis of that advice you can really do a new paper, send it at your own risk. It'll be treated like a new paper. But this is an option that I'm afraid is going to be more and more difficult for us to do, because now we get a lot of submissions. So starting out with not as many submissions, it's more possible to give individual attention, but we still, you know, try to do that. Why does the peer review process usually take so long? So I'm afraid I covered, you know, this issue already, so I can move on to the new one. What are the main differences between journals in economics, I suppose, and econometrics, and journals on law and economics? Well, journals of law and economics, I'll start out with that, tend to be less technical. There is no expectation, no great expectation of being very technical, but journals of law and economics, like most very applied journals, at the very minimum are going to be interested in seeing good empirical work. So while that is a special mechanical things that you have to take into account, it's not like an econometrics journal that would pay a lot more attention to the methodology that you're using and an innovation in methodology. So in applied journal, you know, we're not looking for innovations in methodology, but we would hold the author responsible for not knowing the right methodology to use for the particular issue that the paper is addressing. Is it dealing with the causality issue? If it is a semi or quasi-experimental type work, are the control groups well chosen? Is the treatment adequate? By treatment, I mean in an econometric sense. Do you do the treatment procedure correctly, taking into account the basically event study that motivates what you're doing in this quasi controlled or experimental discussion or review? Journals in economics, if they are general interest journals. Again, I'm representing a Chicago approach that should not be surprising to you. So in the Chicago approach, at least in the good Chicago approach, we deviate now a little bit into some writings that come out of Chicago that are more like MIT. But it used to be an idea in Chicago that a very good journal always has to have some empirical issues to deal with. In other words, if you think that you have a theory that innovates on the theory, you better make sure that your legs are on the ground, that you're talking about the real world, that you're not making up the world, that you're not dealing with a system that is not identifiable. So a good paper in an economics journal, which I take to be a general interest journal, should have a very strong mixture of the two. The proportions can differ. In other words, you know, the paper can be more theoretical, yet it has to have at least some relations with stylized facts. What are you addressing? What real world question is your paper addressing? Or it could be empirical, but even an empirical paper should explain how the experiment is being conducted. Because if it's entirely open, it's really not economics, and I think Tom was alluding to it before. If you write a paper in economics, it's got to have an economic context in it. It's not free for all. It's not, you cannot be entirely eclectic. You have to have an idea of a model so that you have like a campus that you take with you when you go to the forest. If you don't have a campus, what direction are you going? And this is often the problem with, papers that are sent to very good journals that don't clarify it. So a good mixture is the best policy.
Okay. So first of all, thanks a lot, Professor Ehrlich, for your presentation, and also my thanks to Tomasz Mickiewicz. I had actually two questions. First of all, you told already about rejection rate, and you told about differences in the case of normal submissions and in the case of some conferences sponsored by journal. Could you provide some numbers? What is the rejection rate in first case, in second case, and so on? And second question about your experience with submissions, maybe not from Russia, because I'm not sure that you have a lot of submissions from Russia, but for instance from developing countries. What is maybe key problems of such kind of submissions? And what would be useful to know for authors in this audience from your experience? Yeah?
Sure. Okay, these are very good questions. Okay. We don't really publish the rejection rates, but I would say this. When we started, we probably rejected 95%. And the reason for that is that a lot of it was fishing expedition. New journal. I didn't get my paper published in the Journal of Human Resources. Are you tougher or are you lighter? Well, I use these terms, tougher or lighter. We are more particular, I think, in the sense that I never encouraged it and I never told the referees how to do that. But when I get letters from the referees, I find it amazing that I start getting, and this has been since the second year of the journal. The article is fine, but I just don't think that it's on the level of articles in the Journal of Human Capital. I have to pay attention to, kind of what the clients are looking for in the Journal of Human Capital. So I think, the fact that the Journal of Human Capital is published by the University of Chicago Press tells something to the people. And why do they become particular about it? Well, I think this has to do more with the tenure system. So it may not come as a very big surprise to you, but there are universities, not so much in the United States as in Asia, and I don't know about Europe as much, in which the deans and the universities set up a criteria that in order to get tenure, you have to publish in one major journal. So it could be a journal that is covered by the social science citation unit. When we started the Journal of Human Capital, we didn't pay attention to it because everybody would say, well, that's University of Chicago Press, so people will already self-select into it. It made a difference. So we started a little later to try and get the journal into SSCI. Now we have an SSCI. I did detect an increase in submission. So it matters. If you have to treat yourself like a journal that is going to be respected by the committee that sits on your tenure, you have got to hold on to a certain level. So it's not 95% anymore. We have an increase in both the number and the quality of submission, which makes it lighter. Okay? But it's still, a pretty high rejection rate, not 95%. I think that there was another one that you added in the end.
About differences between
Europe
and self-submissions
and developing countries.
conferences and so on.
Oh, you know, the conference is one. As I said, I think that we first of all have a limited number, mainly intended to advertise the range of topics that we are, you know, publishing articles from. Immigration was very important. Happens to be a topic that I am personally working on. The relationship between immigration and human capital, I could give you a lecture. I'm not going to do that now. But it's so obvious because, again, you're dealing with the human element that we think, and we're not the only one, is at the center of the economic scene, not physical capital accumulation anymore. So, you know, you want to advertise it. As long as we will hold special conferences, I think the rejection rate is probably going to be 10 to 20%. But it's still there. It's still there, you know, because sometimes, you know, it's a little tougher because these are invited people that know you, and you still have to give them the bad news. Nobody likes to be rejected. So I think Professor Hall, that is going to speak after me, is going to talk a little bit about that.